Hello, welcome back to another evening of shared stories and adventures. Tonight we're diving into something pretty wild. We're talking about the Stranger Things 5 finale, the absolutely mental conformity gate theory that's taken over the internet, and whether there's actually a secret episode 9 dropping on January 7th. I'll be covering all the topics I can fit in for tonight, but there's definitely more to come. So we'll start with what actually happened in the finale itself. You know, the episode that aired on New Year's Eve and had everyone proper emotional. Then we'll move on to the conformity gate theory, breaking down all the evidence fans have compiled, the clues hidden in plain sight, and why January 7th became the date everyone's fixated on. We'll also talk about what the Duffer Brothers have said, the documentary that's coming, and whether any of this is actually real or just the biggest case of collective delusion in fandom history. Plenty to get talking about, but if you like what I do here and want a way to support the channel, consider subscribing down below. But for now, grab your favourite snacks, get cozy under the blankets, and let's begin. So before we dive into the theory that's got everyone proper obsessed, let's talk about what actually happened in the finale. Let's start with the basics. Stranger Things. Season 5 didn't just drop all at once like we're used to these days. Netflix did something pretty interesting with the release schedule, something they've done before with other big shows, but it definitely added to the whole experience this time around. The season came out in 3 parts. Volume 1 landed on November 26th, 2025, which was the day before American Thanksgiving. That gave us 4 episodes to binge through the holiday weekend. Then we had to wait a full month, which honestly felt like ages before Volume 2 dropped on Christmas Day, December 25th. That volume had 3 more episodes, and then just 6 days later, on New Year's Eve, December 31st, the finale arrived as this standalone event. Each volume released at 5 p.m. Pacific time, which meant different times around the world depending on where you were. For folks in the UK, that was 1 a.m. on the following day. So technically, the finale premiered on January 1st for loads of international viewers, which added this whole other layer to the release, since people were celebrating the new year and then immediately diving into Stranger Things. Now, Netflix didn't just release the finale online, they did something they'd never really done before. On this scale, they gave the finale a proper theatrical release. We're talking about roughly 600 cinemas across the United States and Canada, showing episode 8 on New Year's Eve and continuing through New Year's Day. According to reports, the theatrical run generated somewhere between $20 and $25 million in revenue, which is pretty mental when you think about it. That's not even counting traditional ticket sales, since they sold the tickets as concession vouchers due to some contract issues with the cast's residuals. But still, loads of people went to see it in cinemas, making it this whole event. The split release structure was brilliant for building anticipation, honestly. By the time we got to the finale, fans had been on this emotional journey for over a month. You had people theorizing between volumes, rewatching episodes to catch details they'd missed, and basically working themselves into a proper frenzy about how it would all end. The Duffer Brothers had been saying for ages that this was it. The final season, no more safety net of coming back to these characters. So the stakes felt really high. Going into the finale, fan expectations were all over the place. Some people thought 11 would definitely die. Others were convinced Will was going to sacrifice himself, since his connection to the Upside Down had been such a huge part of the show. There were loads of theories about Vecna not actually being the final villain, or that the Mind Flayer would make some kind of return. People were expecting major character deaths, basically. After watching Game of Thrones and other big finales over the years, audiences have kind of come to expect that the ending of a huge show means loads of people are going to die tragic deaths. The runtime of the finale was announced ahead of time, and it clocked in at 2 hours and 8 minutes. That's longer than most films, which added to the sense that this was going to be epic and conclusive. Netflix even increased their bandwidth by 30% to prepare for the premiere, which tells you how many people they expected to be streaming at once. And even with that preparation, the site crashed shortly after the finale aired. That happened for Volume 1 as well, actually. It just shows how massive the audience was. The critical reception before anyone saw it was mostly positive anticipation. Season 5 as a whole was sitting at around 83% on Rotten Tomatoes based on the first 7 episodes, with critics saying it was genuinely captivating genre fare that solidified the show's pop culture status. But finales are tricky, aren't it? You can have a brilliant season and then completely fumble the ending. So people were cautiously optimistic, but also a bit nervous. By the time December 31st rolled around, social media was absolutely buzzing. People were posting countdowns, sharing their predictions, doing rewatches of key episodes from earlier seasons. It felt like a proper cultural moment, like when everyone was watching the same thing at the same time, which doesn't happen as often anymore in the streaming era. So by the time we got to New Year's Eve, fans had been on this emotional roller coaster for over a month. They'd seen Volume 1's setup, Volume 2's escalation, and now they were finally going to get the ending. And what they got in that finale? Well, it's complicated. Episode 8, cheekily titled The Right Side Up, is this massive 2-hour finale that brings together basically every storyline from the entire series, and I mean every storyline. Characters who hadn't interacted in seasons are suddenly working together. Plot threads from as far back as Season 1 are getting resolved, and the whole thing moves at this breakneck pace that doesn't really let up until the very end. The episode wastes absolutely no time. It picks up right where Episode 7 left off, with the gang putting their final plan into motion. They're calling it the Beanstalk Plan, which is such a perfectly nerdy name for what's essentially a suicide mission. The idea is to use the moment when the Abyss, which is this even darker dimension that Vecna's been trying to merge with Earth, gets close enough to the Upside Down that they can actually reach it. They're going to climb up from the top of the Hawkins Lab Tower in the Upside Down and basically jump into the Abyss to rescue the kidnapped kids. Meanwhile, 11, Carly and Max are attempting something that's never been done before. They're going to team up psychically and enter Vecna's mind to attack him from the inside while he's trying to complete the ritual to merge the dimensions. It's this 3-way mental assault that requires 11 to use the sensory deprivation tank. The same one she used all those years ago in Season 1 when she first accidentally opened the gate to the Upside Down. There's something kind of poetic about that, using the thing that started all this to hopefully end it. Hopper and Murray are on bomb duty. They've rigged up this absolutely massive explosive that's meant to destroy the Upside Down completely once everyone's safely out. The bomb's on a remote trigger, so they're basically waiting for Dustin to give them the signal that the kids have been rescued and everyone's clear. No pressure or anything, just the fate of the world hanging on perfect timing. Once 11 gets into the tank and goes under, she starts searching for Henry Creel, which is Vecna's real name, if you've forgotten. Carly joins her in this shared mental space, and then they find Max, who's been stuck in this weird in-between state since Vecna first got to her. The three of them journey through Vecna's memories, which is this twisted maze of his worst moments and the things that turned him into the monster he became. It's disturbing stuff, honestly. Very dark, very visceral, and it really drives home just how far gone Henry is. They eventually find Vecna in his mind, and they start this massive psychic battle. But here's where things get complicated. Vecna's smart. He's been doing this for decades, manipulating people and realities. So he figures out pretty quickly what the plan actually is. He realizes that if he keeps fighting them in his mind, he might lose. So he does what Vecna does best. He starts messing with everyone. Back in the Upside Down, Hopper's protecting Eleven's body while she's in the tank. He's standing guard, making sure nothing happens to her while she's vulnerable. And that's when Vecna gets into Hopper's head. He makes Hopper see this horrifying vision where Carly and 11 have actually agreed to sacrifice themselves. Like they knew all along that the only way to truly end the cycle was for them to die along with the Upside Down. Hopper sees this whole conversation play out, and it looks absolutely real. He's convinced that 11's planning to stay behind and let herself be killed in the explosion. Meanwhile, the rest of the gang is in the Abyss trying to rescue the kidnapped kids. This is where little Holly Wheeler becomes unexpectedly important. She ends up taking charge of the group of kids, leading them through the Demogorgon-infested nightmare that is the Abyss. And Max, who everyone thought was this monstrous creature working for Vecna, reveals to the kids that she's actually still herself. She's been fighting Vecna's control this whole time, and she uses her connection to him to help the kids escape. Just as everything seems to be coming together, Vecna makes his move on 11 directly. He invades her mind while she's attacking him, which is this really clever bit of mental warfare. He figures out exactly what the plan is, sees every detail of what they're trying to do, and in that moment of realization, he decides to shift tactics completely. If he can't win the mental battle, he'll win the physical one. Back in reality, Dr. K makes her final play. She's this government scientist who's been trying to get her hands on 11 for the entire season, wanting to continue the experiments that started all of this. She shows up with a military helicopter using EMP waves to disrupt 11 and Carly's psychic abilities. There's this tense moment where it looks like she's actually going to succeed, where Carly's about to be executed by one of Kay's soldiers. But Murray, being the absolute legend he is, throws a grenade mixed with plastic explosive and takes out the helicopter just in time. The explosion is spectacular, and it gives everyone the breathing room they need. Then Vecna pulls his masterstroke. He gets into Hopper's head again and makes him think he's actually shooting 11. Hopper, panicked and convinced he's being attacked, fires his gun. In the chaos and confusion, he yanks 11 out of the tank, which forcibly pulls her, Max and Carly out of Vecna's mind. This leaves Holly in charge of saving the kidnapped children on her own, with Henry hot on their heels through the twisted corridors of his mental landscape. 11 and Carly, now kicked out of Vecna's mind, have to regroup quickly. They head straight for the abyss to join the others for the final confrontation, but Hopper's not having it. He threatens to refuse to detonate the bomb that will destroy the Upside Down if 11's actually planning to sacrifice herself. And that's when she says it, the line that basically confirms what's about to happen. I have to end the cycle. From that moment on, you kind of know where this is going. 11's made up her mind. She's going to stay behind to make sure the Upside Down is destroyed and to ensure that her blood can't be used to create more experiments, more children with powers, more suffering. It's this heartbreaking decision, but it also makes sense for her character. She's been carrying the weight of all this since she was a little kid, and now she's choosing to end it, even if it means ending herself. The final battle in the abyss is absolutely chaotic. Everyone's fighting for their lives. Vecna's trying to complete his ritual to merge the worlds. The kids are trying to escape with the rescued children. And 11 and Carly are throwing everything they have at Henry. Just as the two dimensions are about to crush everyone, literally about to collide and destroy them all, 11 finds Henry Creel in the mind space. He's in the middle of the ritual, and she does the only thing she can. She uses her powers to push him through a window in the Creel house, severing his connection to the 12 missing kids. It works. The worlds stop drawing closer. Vecna's hold is broken. The kids make it out. Max reveals she's still herself and helps everyone escape. And then Dustin gives the signal. Hopper and Murray detonate the bomb, but 11 stays behind. The epilogue is where the finale either feels like a proper send-off or starts to feel a bit off, depending on who you ask. We jump forward 18 months. Hawkins has been rebuilt. The town looks almost normal again, which is kind of surreal after everything we've seen it go through over 5 seasons. There's this memorial in the town square dedicated to the lives lost in what they're calling the Great Earthquake, which is obviously the cover story for the interdimensional war that just happened. You know, standard Hawkins behaviour. Pretend it was natural disaster and move on. It's graduation day at Hawkins High School, and basically everyone we care about is there. The class of 1989 is about to get their diplomas and move on with their lives. The ceremony itself is pretty standard until Dustin takes the podium to give his valedictorian speech, which is absolutely brilliant. He talks about how all the chaos and trauma that Hawkins has been through over the years actually brought the community closer together. He frames it like a Dungeons and Dragons campaign, talking about how they faced impossible odds and came out stronger. It's emotional and funny and very Dustin. And then, because he can't help himself, he pulls off this massive prank with Erica's help that leaves everyone laughing. Even after everything, he's still got that chaotic energy. After the ceremony, We get these little check-ins with everyone to see where they've landed. Nancy and Jonathan have this conversation where they acknowledge that their relationship has run its course, but there's no bitterness. They're good. Steve and Robin are still best mates, still working through life together. There's this sense that even though romantic relationships might have shifted, the friendships are solid. They all promise to stay close, to prioritize their bond over everything else. And honestly, it feels genuine. Joyce and Hopper finally get their moment. They have dinner at Enzo's, the restaurant they were supposed to go to, way back before everything went sideways. It's this really sweet scene where they're just enjoying being together without the weight of the world on their shoulders. And then Hopper proposes. He's got this whole speech about starting a new chapter, about leaving Hawkins behind and building something fresh. They're planning to move to Montauk, New York, which is a nice little Easter egg since that was the original name, and setting for Stranger Things before it became what it is. Hopper's got a job lined up as chief of police there. Joyce says yes, obviously. After everything they've been through, they deserve this happiness. We find out that Jonathan's studying filmmaking at New York University, which has been his dream since season 1. He's working on this anti-capitalist cannibal movie, which is apparently based on a film the Duffer Brothers made in college. It's a weird detail, but it fits Jonathan perfectly. Max and Lucas are together. They finally had their movie date, the one they'd been trying to have since season 2, and they've settled into this comfortable relationship. Max has fully recovered from everything Vecna put her through, which is nice to see after how much she suffered. Ted Wheeler somehow is alive and well. He's at the graduation sitting in his chair being Ted. It's almost funny how he just keeps surviving everything. The real emotional centre of the epilogue, though, is the final Dungeons and Dragons game. The whole gang gathers in the Wheelers' basement one last time. Mike, Dustin, Lucas, Will and Max are all there, sitting around the table like they did in the very first episode of the show. It's this beautiful, full-circle moment. Mike's running the campaign, and he's giving each character, each of his friends, a proper ending to their story. He describes where everyone ends up, what they go on to do, how they find happiness and purpose after their grand adventure. And then he talks about 11. Mike spins this theory that before 11 died in the explosion, Kaylee cast a powerful protection spell, an illusion spell. The 11 who died in the Upside Down, the one they all watched disappear, wasn't actually the real 11. It was an illusion created by Carly to fool the military, to make sure they'd stop hunting her, stop trying to continue the experiments. The real 11, Mike says, is somewhere far away, somewhere safe and beautiful. He describes this place with 3 waterfalls in the distance, lush and green and peaceful. A place where she's finally free. Everyone at the table is crying, like properly crying. And then the show gives us this vision of exactly what Mike's describing. We see 11 backpacking through this gorgeous natural landscape, looking peaceful and whole. She's got a small smile on her face. She looks free in a way we've never seen her before. The Duffer Brothers have been really cagey about whether this is real or just Mike's hopeful imagination. In interviews, they've said they want to leave 11's fate up to the audience. Ross Duffer said she lives on in their hearts, whether that's real or not, which is about as non-committal as you can get, honestly. The game wraps up. Holly and her friends come downstairs to take over the table, ready to start their own D&D adventures. It's this lovely passing of the torch moment. The older kids are moving on, growing up, and the next generation is stepping in. And then Mike closes the basement door behind him as he leaves. That shot of the door closing is the last thing we see. The Duffer Brothers have said it represents Mike closing the door on his childhood. It's meant to be this poignant, final image of them moving into adulthood and leaving the magic behind. On the surface, it's this neat, emotional ending, where everyone gets closure and moves on with their lives. Everything's wrapped up. The bad guy's defeated, the town is safe, people are in healthy relationships, futures look bright, but loads of fans watched it and thought, something's not right here. And that's where Conformity Gate was born. Conformity Gate is this absolutely massive fan theory that emerged literally within hours of the finale dropping on December 31st. We're talking about a fully formed conspiracy theory with evidence, predictions, and a whole community behind it, before most people had even finished watching the episode. And honestly, it's one of the most comprehensive fan theories I've seen in ages. The name itself, Conformity Gate, comes from this observation that loads of fans had about the epilogue. Everyone in that 18-month time jump felt weirdly conformist, like they'd all been flattened into these sanitized, socially acceptable versions of themselves. Characters who'd spent 5 seasons being complex and messy and real suddenly felt like they were playing roles, going through the motions. The theory suggests that's because they are, that they're all conforming to a reality that Vecna has constructed for them. The earliest posts started appearing on Twitter, which is now X, on January 1st. One of the first was from a user called 67gate, who wrote something like, "Does anyone not find it weird how every single character, in the end, turned into a conformed version of themselves?" That post got over 36,000 likes in just 4 days. People were clearly feeling the same unease. Then another user posted a screenshot from the Byler Nation Discord server. For those who don't know, that's a community of fans who ship Will and Mike together. They'd been analysing the runtime of Season 5 and noticed something interesting. The total runtime of all 8 episodes comes to roughly 10 hours and 20 minutes. And back in Season 1, Mike says their D&D campaign was 10 hours long, but he needs 20 more minutes to finish it properly. Fans took this as evidence that there's another episode coming, that we need those 20 more minutes to get the real ending. The hashtag ConformityGate started trending almost immediately. People were posting threads, making TikToks, creating Google Docs that compiled every piece of evidence they could find. One TikTok video breaking down the theory got over 3.5 million views in a single day. That's how fast this spread. The basic premise of Conformity Gate is pretty straightforward, even if the evidence gets complicated. The theory says that Vecna actually won. The finale we watched, and possibly parts of Volume 2 as well, are all an illusion. Either the entire audience has been tricked, or the characters themselves are under Vecna's curse, and we're watching their collective hallucination play out. Everything feels wrong because it is wrong. The happy endings, the neat resolutions, the too perfect closure, it's all fake. Vecna's created this dreamlike vision where everyone conforms to what they think they should be, where all their problems are solved, where everything works out just a bit too nicely. According to the theory, the real ending hasn't been shown yet, and it's going to be released as a secret 9th episode on January 7th, 2026. That's tomorrow, by the way. The theory has gotten so specific that believers have a date, a time, everything. They think Netflix and the Duffer Brothers have pulled off the greatest plot twist in television history by making everyone believe the show ended when it actually hasn't. The theory spread like wildfire across TikTok, Twitter, Reddit, and Discord servers. You've got people on TikTok making these elaborate video essays with background music from the show, breaking down every frame. Twitter threads that go on for literally hundreds of tweets, examining every detail. Reddit posts with thousands of comments, debating the merits of each piece of evidence. Discord servers dedicated entirely to tracking updates and finding new clues. And the community is properly split. You've got the believers who are absolutely convinced that episode 9 is coming, and that the Duffers have orchestrated this brilliant meta-commentary on conformity and illusion. They're excited, they're confident, and they're spending hours analysing everything. Then you've got the skeptics who think this is the most delusional thing they've ever seen, that fans are just in denial about an ending they didn't like. And somewhere in the middle, you've got people who don't really believe it but kind of want it to be true, because the alternative is accepting that the ending was just disappointing. Some fans have called it collective psychosis. Others have called it the greatest community project in modern fandom. One person on Twitter wrote, "If this happens, this would be the greatest writing the world has ever seen." Another said, "Why is Conformity Gate low-key more entertaining than Volume 2 and the finale?" Which is quite telling, honestly. The theory isn't just vague feelings, though. Fans have compiled this absolutely mental list of evidence, visual clues, meta details, narrative hints, and some of it's actually quite compelling when you look at it all together. The visual clues are where Conformity Gate really starts to feel less like fan delusion, and more like, well, maybe they're onto something. One of the biggest pieces of evidence that fans latched onto immediately is the graduation scene. During that ceremony where everyone's sitting in their caps and gowns, loads of people noticed that basically every main character is holding their hands in this very specific way. They're clasped in front of them, positioned at their chest or stomach, in a pose that looks eerily similar to how Henry Creel stands. If you go back and look at scenes of Vecna, or Henry before he became Vecna, he's got this distinctive posture, very rigid, very controlled, hands folded just so. And in the graduation scene, you've got Mike, Will, Lucas, basically everyone sitting in that exact same position. It looks uniform, conformist even. Now, you could argue that's just how people sit during formal ceremonies. But the thing is, Stranger Things has never been that precise about blocking before. Characters usually look natural, a bit slouchy, very teenagery. This looked staged, intentional. Then there's the Wheeler family haircuts. In the epilogue, Nancy, Mike and Holly all have these weirdly similar haircuts. They're all sporting this cropped, neat style that makes them look almost identical in silhouette. Fans have pointed out that this matching hairstyle thing is reminiscent of how Henry Creel looked as a child, with that very particular short, neat cut. It's like the entire Wheeler family has conformed to this one aesthetic. And when you pair that with everyone's hand positions, it starts to feel less coincidental. During the graduation sequence, there's this student holding a blank yellow poster. Just completely blank. No message, no decoration, nothing. They're holding it up like it's meant to say something, but it's just yellow. Fans have been trying to figure out what that's about, and the most popular theory is that it's a visual indicator that something's off. That details are missing or incomplete because this reality isn't fully formed. It's like when you're dreaming and you try to read something but the words don't make sense or keep changing. The What's It board game appears multiple times throughout the finale and Volume 2. It's this recurring visual element that shows up in the background, on shelves, in people's homes. And here's where it gets interesting. Back in Season 4, the kids nicknamed Henry Creel Mr. What's It when they were trying to figure out who he was. So having this board game called What's It appearing over and over feels like the show is winking at us, reminding us of Henry's presence even when we think he's gone. Some fans took screenshots of the D&D books visible in the final basement scene and claimed that if you look at the spines in the right order, they spell out X a lie. I've looked at the screenshots myself, and I'm not entirely convinced, but enough. People have pointed it out that it's become part of the theory. The idea is that everything happening in Dimension X, which is another term for the Upside Down, was a lie. That the battle, the victory, all of it was fake. Then we've got the red exit signs. This one's a bit more abstract, but fans have noticed that there are 3 distinct date scenes in the epilogue that each feature a red exit sign in the background. Will's at a bar with a date, there's one visible. Joyce and Hopper at Enzo's, another red exit sign. Max and Lucas on their date, yet another one. 3 dates, 3 exit signs. The theory is that these are visual clues that the characters need to exit this false reality, that there's a way out if they can just see it. There's this dial on a prop that appears in both Episode 1 and Episode 5, and fans notice that the pointer changes colour between appearances. In Episode 1, it's grey. In Episode 5, it's red. This gets compared to a moment in Vecna's mind where Max and Holly see a merry-go-round change colour, from yellow to black, and that colour change led them to the exit. The implication is that colour changes in general are meant to signal exit paths or shifts in reality. Another dream logic clue that loads of people spotted involves watches. In the scene where Will sort of comes out to his friends, he's wearing a watch that doesn't display the time. And in Mike's epilogue, when he's telling his D&D story about 11, Jonathan's wearing a watch that also shows no time. This is apparently a really common element in lucid dreaming. When you're dreaming, you can't reliably read clocks or tell time. Digital displays don't work properly. So having multiple characters wearing watches that don't show the time could be a hint that they're in a dreamlike state. There's also this thing with the basement doorknob. In different shots of the Wheeler basement door, The position of the doorknob appears to be inverted, like it's on the opposite side of the door in some frames compared to others. Fans have interpreted this as a visual reference to being in the upside down, where everything's flipped and reversed. If the doorknob position keeps changing, maybe that's because they're seeing it from both the right side up and the upside down simultaneously. Throughout the finale, there are these moments where characters seem to break the fourth wall. They look directly at the camera in ways that feel deliberate. Mike especially has a few shots where he's staring right at the lens, right at us, like he's trying to communicate something. It's subtle, but once you notice it, you can't unsee it. And for a show that's never really done fourth wall breaks before, it feels significant. Multiple characters in the epilogue make hand gestures that mirror Vecna's distinctive movements. That finger positioning, the way he moves his hands when he's using his powers, or manipulating people. You see Steve do it, Nancy does it, even Joyce has a moment where her hands move in that very specific Vecna way. It's like his presence is bleeding through into everyone's behaviour. Individually, most of these clues could be explained away. Continuity errors happen. Props get reused, blocking can look weird, but when you compile them all together, when you watch the finale specifically looking for these details, it does start to paint a picture. It starts to feel like maybe the show is trying to tell us something. I honestly hadn't noticed half of this stuff on my first watch. I was too busy crying about 11 to pay attention to doorknobs and exit signs. But once people started pointing them out, I went back and looked. And yeah, they're all there. Whether they're intentional clues or just unfortunate coincidences that fans have latched onto, I genuinely can't tell. On their own, most of these could be chalked up to overthinking or reading too much into random details. But when you put them all together, it starts to look like a pattern. This is where things get proper interesting, because some of the evidence isn't actually in the show itself. It's in how the show was made and released. Before Season 5 even started filming, there were reports that the Duffer Brothers had the scripts printed on red paper to prevent people from photocopying them and leaking spoilers. Red paper doesn't photocopy well, it just comes out as a black page, so it's a pretty clever security measure. Loads of big productions do this for finales or scripts with major twists. But then, after the finale aired, fans started noticing something weird in behind-the-scenes footage. You can see the actors reading from scripts printed on regular white paper. Not red, just normal white. Now this could mean absolutely nothing. Maybe they used red paper for some drafts and white for others. Maybe the red paper thing was exaggerated or misreported, but fans have taken it as evidence that there's a controlled narrative happening, that what we were told about the production doesn't match what actually happened, which makes them wonder what else doesn't match. Then there's the Netflix search thing, which is probably the most compelling piece of meta-evidence. If you go to Netflix right now and search for Season 5, Episode 9, Stranger Things is the only show that comes up. If you search fake ending, same thing, only Stranger Things. If you search conformity gate, which is a term that only exists because of this theory, Netflix still serves you Stranger Things. That's pretty weird, isn't it? You'd expect those searches to either return nothing or maybe a bunch of different shows, but it's just Stranger Things. Some people think this is Netflix trolling everyone. Others think it's just the algorithm responding to the sheer volume of people searching those terms in relation to Stranger Things, so the system has learned to associate them. But believers in the theory see it as Netflix leaving breadcrumbs, as a hint that yes, there is an episode 9, and if you're searching for it, you're on the right track. The WSQK radio station is another strange element. Throughout Season 5, the show created this temporary, official radio station as part of the story. It was broadcasting in-universe content, playing music from the show, creating this whole immersive experience for fans. But apparently, according to fans who were monitoring it, the station ended at 11 p.m. GMT on January 1st. Just stopped broadcasting. That's 2 hours before the finale was released at 1 a.m. GMT. Why would you shut down a promotional radio station 2 hours before the biggest episode? That timing feels off, and loads of fans have been analysing the audio from the WSQK broadcasts, especially the static. Some people have claimed that if you enhance certain sections of the static, you can hear a message that says, "You need to wake up." I've listened to the clips and honestly, I can hear it once someone points it out, but that might just be pareidolia, like hearing faces in white noise or seeing shapes in clouds. Our brains are really good at finding patterns that aren't actually there. Then there's the runtime theory, which I mentioned briefly earlier, but it's worth going into more detail. In Season 1, Episode 1, Mike is running a D&D campaign for the group. At the end of the session, he tells them the campaign lasted 10 hours, but he needs 20 more minutes to finish it properly. The boys don't let him finish. They have to go home, so the campaign ends incomplete. Fans calculated the total runtime of Season 5. All 8 episodes, including credits, comes to approximately 10 hours and 20 minutes, exactly the amount of time Mike said the campaign needed. So the theory is that Season 5 as released represents the 10-hour incomplete version. And we still need those 20 more minutes, which would be Episode 9, to get the proper ending, to finish the campaign the way it was meant to be finished. I'll be honest, that one gave me chills when I first read it. It's the kind of detail that feels too specific to be coincidental. There's been talk about copyright registrations as well. Fans who track these things, and apparently there are people who monitor copyright filings for unreleased episodes, noticed that some registrations for Season 5 episodes seem delayed or incomplete. Now, this could easily be explained by holiday timing. The finale came out on December 31st, New Year's Eve. Loads of offices are closed between Christmas and New Year. Registration delays during that period are completely normal, but believers see it as suspicious, as evidence that there's an episode that hasn't been registered yet because it's been kept secret. One detail that loads of people found unsettling is how the final credits are presented. They show the entire series as if it's a game. Like everything we've been watching was a D&D campaign, a story being told rather than events that happened. That framing device is consistent with the show's themes, obviously. D&D has been central since Episode 1, but coming right after an ending where loads of fans already felt like something was off, it added to this sense of unreality. Like the show itself is saying, was any of this real? Or was it all just a game? Netflix made a post on social media that simply said, "Your future is on the way," with a January 7th timestamp. On the surface, this is clearly about their 2026 slate announcement, which is officially scheduled for that date. Netflix does these big announcements at the start of every year where they reveal what's coming. But the timing, the phrasing, and the heavy use of Stranger Things imagery in the promotional materials has made believers think it's a coded message. That your future could mean the future of Stranger Things specifically, not just Netflix's catalogue. The post features loads of Stranger Things visuals. The 2026 slate promo video that Netflix released leans really heavily into upside-down aesthetics, with posters from Season 5 visible on the walls, and this overall tone that feels more like a Stranger Things teaser than a generic Netflix announcement. Believers argue that if it was just about announcing the year's content, why focus so much on a show that's supposedly already over? And here's something that doesn't quite fit with the theory, but is worth mentioning. The theatrical release of the finale was massive. They got 600 cinemas involved. They pre-sold over 1 million tickets, technically sold as concession vouchers, but still. They generated somewhere between $20 and $25 million. That's a huge investment in promoting an ending. Would Netflix and the Duffers really do all that for a fake ending? Would they risk the backlash if people paid money to see something in cinemas that turned out to be an elaborate misdirection? Some believers think that's exactly the point, that the theatrical release makes the twist even better, that the audacity of it making people pay to see a fake ending in cinemas would be the most brilliant and insane marketing stunt in television history. So they're not saying yes, but they're also not giving a hard no, which, depending on how you look at it, either means nothing or means everything. January 7th isn't just a random date that fans pulled out of thin air. There's actually loads of reasons they've latched onto this specific day. The most obvious one comes from the finale itself. In that last D&D game in the Wheeler basement, Will rolls the dice and gets a 7. It's his final roll of the entire series, and it's a 7. That alone wouldn't mean much, but loads of fans went back and checked Will's very first roll in Season 1, Episode 1. That roll, the one that starts the entire adventure, also a 7. So you've got the series bookended by Will rolling 7s, and now everyone's convinced that 7 is significant. Then there's the release pattern that Netflix established for Season 5. Volume 1 came out the day before Thanksgiving. Volume 2 came out on Christmas Day. The finale came out on New Year's Eve. They were spacing these releases around major holidays, creating these event moments where people would be off work, spending time with family, able to sit down and watch together. January 7th is Orthodox Christmas, which is celebrated by loads of people around the world. It fits the pattern of holiday releases that Netflix had been following. But more importantly than Orthodox Christmas, January 7th is when Netflix has officially scheduled their 2026 slate announcements. Every year, Netflix does this big reveal of what's coming over the next 12 months. Films, series, specials, everything. It's usually a pretty standard press release situation, maybe a video compilation of trailers and teasers. Believers in Conformity Gate see this as the perfect cover. Netflix could drop episode 9 as a surprise during the announcement, or reveal it as the final piece of content for 2026, and it would be this massive moment. The ultimate plot twist delivered during what everyone thought was just a routine corporate announcement. Throughout Season 5, the number 7 appears repeatedly in ways that feel deliberate once you start looking for them. 7 letters in Hawkins, 7 main characters in the core friend group, if you count Max, 7 episodes before the finale. Fans have compiled lists of these occurrences, and while some definitely feel like a stretch, there are enough of them that it doesn't seem completely random. The timing also makes a kind of narrative sense. 1 week after the finale gives people enough time to process what they watched, to feel the disappointment or confusion or whatever emotions they're having, and then to have their minds completely blown by a surprise reveal. It's long enough that people have mostly moved on, but short enough that the conversation is still happening. If you were going to drop a secret episode, 1 week later is probably the ideal window. Netflix has a history of surprise drops, though not usually for scripted content. They've done surprise stand-up specials, surprise documentary releases, things like that. But a surprise episode of their biggest series? That would be unprecedented. Then again, Beyoncé surprise dropped an entire album back in 2013, and it changed how the music industry thought about releases. Loads of artists have done surprise drops since then. Could television do the same thing? In theory, yes. In practice, it's a lot more complicated because of contracts and union regulations and all the business side of things. Fans have also pointed out that the Duffer Brothers love puzzles and mysteries. They've hidden Easter eggs throughout the entire series. They've rewarded close watching and attention to detail. They've built this whole mythology where nothing is quite as it seems. So the idea that they would construct an elaborate meta-puzzle where the show comments on itself, where the finale is secretly about how audiences accept false realities, that actually does fit their style. It's ambitious, it's risky, but it's not completely out of character. Some believers have gone even deeper into numerology. They've analysed timestamps, episode lengths, the number of scenes in various episodes, all trying to find more patterns that point to 7 or January 7th. At a certain point, it does start to feel like people are finding what they want to find. You know? Like, if you look hard enough at anything, you'll spot patterns. But the core evidence, the Will's dice rolls, and the Netflix announcement date, and the holiday pattern, that stuff is at least grounded in verifiable facts. 1 week is also just long enough for a documentary to not spoil things. One Last Adventure, the behind-the-scenes doc, comes out on January 12th. If episode 9 was going to exist, you'd want it to come out before the documentary, so that the doc could address both endings. Having the documentary come out first would potentially spoil the surprise. So January 7th makes sense from a scheduling perspective. The other thing is that tomorrow isn't just any Tuesday. It's the first full week after the holidays. People are back at work, back to their routines, but still in that post-New Year mindset where everything feels fresh and possible. It's when people are paying attention to what's new, what's coming, what's ahead. From a marketing perspective, if you wanted maximum impact for a surprise drop, this week would be it. So between the visual clues, the meta evidence, and this very specific date, you can see why loads of people are convinced something's coming. Whether it's wishful thinking or actual foresight, we'll find out soon enough. This is where conformity gate goes from interesting theory to actually wait a minute territory, because some of the dialogue in the finale feels like it's talking directly to the audience. Back in episode 4 of Volume 1, there's this scene where Lucas is trying to figure out what's happening with Holly and the other missing kids. He's piecing together clues, working through the pattern of disappearances, and he says this line that loads of fans have latched onto. He says, "I don't believe in coincidences." Not anymore. On the surface, it's just Lucas being a good detective, using what he's learned from years of dealing with supernatural threats. But fans have interpreted it as a meta-commentary. Like the show is telling us that all these details we're noticing, all these patterns, they're not coincidences, they mean something. And here's where it gets interesting. That line is delivered with Lucas looking almost directly at the camera. It's subtle, but once you notice it, it feels deliberate, like he's not just talking to the other characters, he's talking to us. Throughout the series, Max has always been the one to call out when things feel too convenient or too neat. She's skeptical, practical, grounded. And in the finale, during that last D&D game, she makes a comment about Mike's storytelling. She basically says, his endings are always too perfect, too wrapped up. Everyone gets exactly what they want. Everything works out just a bit too nicely. And real life doesn't work that way. Mike gets a bit defensive, but Max doubles down. She's saying that neat, satisfying endings where all the loose ends are tied up, that's fantasy. That's not how things actually go. And then the show gives us exactly that kind of ending. Everyone paired off nicely. Everyone moving forward with clear plans. No messy complications. It's almost like the show is commenting on itself, acknowledging that what we're watching is too neat to be real. There's this crucial scene in episode 7 where the gang is trying to understand Vecna's tactics. Robin's explaining how his powers work, how he traps people. She talks about how all of Vecna's victims share one thing in common before he gets them. They're all unconscious. They go into a trance. And then she turns to Mike and says, "What happens when Vecna captures you?" Mike responds, "You go into a trance." Robin nods and says something like, "No wonder everyone was so clueless. It's a trance." Now, the scene is clearly about Holly and the missing kids. That's the literal meaning. But loads of fans heard that exchange and thought, wait, is Robin explaining to Mike, who's our audience surrogate, that everyone in the story is in a trance? That we're watching characters who are clueless because they're under Vecna's control? The line, "Hello, the fourth wall break is calling, pick up the phone," started circulating online right after the finale dropped, referencing this exact moment. Throughout Volume 2 and the finale, characters keep asking each other variations of the same question. Is any of this real? Are we sure this is happening? How do we know we're not being manipulated? These questions come up so often that it starts to feel less like natural dialogue and more like the show repeatedly asking the audience the same thing. Are you sure what you're watching is real? Mike's entire character arc in the finale revolves around him questioning reality and imposing meaning onto ambiguous situations. He's the one who insists that 11 survived despite no evidence. He's the one who constructs this elaborate theory about Carly's protection spell creating an illusion. He's the one giving everyone their perfect endings in the D&D game. Fans have interpreted Mike as representing the audience. He's creating the story he wants to believe in, regardless of what actually happened, and the show lets that interpretation hang there without confirming or denying it. The too perfect problem is massive when you actually think about it. Everyone gets what they want. Joyce and Hopper finally get their happy ending and engagement. Jonathan achieves his dream of film school. Nancy and Jonathan part on good terms with no drama. Steve survives despite being in constant danger all season. Max recovers completely from catastrophic injuries, Lucas and Max end up together. Will gets to move forward without the weight of the upside-down connection. Even Ted Wheeler survives. In a show that's been brutally realistic about trauma and loss, where Barb died in season 1 and stayed dead, where Bob died saving everyone, where Max spent an entire season in a coma, suddenly everyone's getting happy endings. It feels off, and the show seems aware that it feels off, because characters keep commenting on how strange it is that everything worked out. The Duffer Brothers have been really cagey about Eleven's fate, which is unusual for them. Usually, they're pretty straightforward about what happened to characters. But with Eleven, they've given multiple interviews where they refuse to confirm whether she's alive or dead. Ross Duffer said, "She lives on in their hearts, whether that's real or not." Matt Duffer said they wanted to leave her fate up to the audience. That's not how you talk about a clear death. That's how you talk about something ambiguous, something that could go either way. And then there's Mike's theory about Carly's protection spell. Carly's entire power set is based on creating illusions. She can make people see things that aren't there. She can make herself and others invisible. She can manipulate perception. So Mike theorizing that Carly used her powers to create a fake Eleven, an illusion that died in the explosion, while the real Eleven escaped, that's actually consistent with what we know Carly can do. But it's also exactly the kind of thing Vecna could do, creating a false reality where everyone believes what they saw. The 3 waterfalls detail is weirdly specific. Mike describes this place where Eleven supposedly is, with 3 waterfalls in the distance, lush greenery, mountains, peace. And then we see it. The show gives us a vision of exactly what Mike described. But here's the thing. That level of specificity, that perfect match between what Mike imagines and what we see, that's dream logic. That's how visions work, not reality. In reality, you don't describe something and then have it appear exactly as you pictured it. That's the kind of thing that happens in illusions or manipulated perceptions. Every time someone in the finale starts to question what's happening, another character reassures them. Every time doubt creeps in, it gets smoothed over. It's like watching people talk themselves into accepting a false reality, which again could just be characters processing trauma and moving forward. Or it could be characters under Vecna's influence, conforming to the reality he's constructed for them. Lucas tells Mike at one point that he's seeing patterns where there aren't any, that he's trying to make meaning out of random events because he can't accept that Eleven's gone. And Mike admits that might be true. But then the show rewards Mike's pattern seeking by showing us Eleven alive. So was Lucas right that Mike was seeing false patterns? Or was Mike right that the patterns meant something? The show doesn't give us a clear answer. Vecna's established pattern throughout the series is to trap people in idealized or horrifying versions of reality based on their guilt, fears, or desires. He shows them what they most want or most dread, and he keeps them there. An ending where everyone gets what they want, where all the trauma is neatly resolved, where everything works out. That's exactly the kind of false paradise Vecna would create. It's heaven as a trap. The finale also has this weird pacing issue that loads of people noticed. The battle feels rushed, but the epilogue feels stretched. Like the show spent way more time showing us the aftermath than the actual resolution. Fans have theorized that's because the battle wasn't real or wasn't important. The epilogue is where the actual manipulation is happening, so that's where the show lingers. When you line up all the dialogue like this, it does start to feel like the show is commenting on itself, like it's winking at us and saying, you're watching a constructed happy ending. Whether that's intentional meta-commentary about storytelling or actual evidence of Vecna's illusion, I honestly can't tell. But I get why people think there's more to it. You'd think with a theory this massive, Netflix or the Duffer Brothers would have shut it down immediately. But their responses? They've been interesting to say the least. The Duffer Brothers gave several interviews right around the finale's release. In a Variety interview published just before New Year's, Matt Duffer said very clearly, "This is a complete story. It's done." That sounds pretty definitive, doesn't it? Like there's no room for interpretation. The story is complete. Full stop. But then Ross Duffer added something that muddied the waters a bit. He said, when we finish a season, there's always the safety net of, oh, we get to go back to these characters. That is going to be the hardest thing to adjust to when it's January 1st and it's like, oh, we don't have that. Now, believers in Conformity Gate have analysed that quote to death. Ross specifically says January 1st, which is the day after the finale aired. He's talking about not having the safety net anymore, starting January 1st. But what if January 7th brings something? What if the safety net is gone on January 1st but returns briefly for one more episode? It's probably reading too much into a casual comment, but you can see how every word gets scrutinised. The Duffers have been remarkably consistent about saying the show is over. They're not making season 6. They're done with these characters' stories. They've moved on creatively. But here's what's interesting. In all these interviews, neither of them has explicitly said there is no episode 9. They've said the story is complete. They've said it's done. But they haven't addressed the specific theory that there's a secret 9th episode coming. That silence could mean nothing. Or it could mean they're not allowed to address it directly, because that would spoil the surprise. When it comes to Eleven's fate, though, that's where things get properly ambiguous. The Duffers have given multiple interviews where they refuse to confirm whether she's alive or dead. In a Netflix Two Dumb interview, Ross said, "She lives on in their hearts, whether that's real or not." That's an incredibly non-committal answer. In a separate interview with The Wrap, Matt said, "We want to leave her fate up to the audience. We debated this in the writer's room more than anything else in season 5. That level of ambiguity is unusual for them. When Bob died in season 2, they didn't leave it ambiguous. When Billy died in season 3, that was clear. When Eddie died in season 4, no question about it. But with 11, the main character of the entire series, they're being deliberately vague. Why? Believers think it's because 11's fate is tied to the larger question of whether the ending is real. If they confirm she's dead, that confirms the ending is real. If they confirm she's alive, that undermines Mike's emotional theory and the ambiguity they've built. So they're stuck in this position where they can't answer the question without revealing something bigger. Skeptics think the Duffers are just being pretentious about art and interpretation, that they want people to have their own reading of the ending, to choose whether they believe Mike's hopeful theory or accept that 11 sacrificed herself. It's the ending as Rorschach test. You see what you want to see. On January 5th, just a couple days ago, Netflix made an announcement that threw more fuel on the fire. They revealed One Last Adventure, the making of Stranger Things 5, a behind-the-scenes documentary coming out on January 12th. That's 6 days after the supposed episode 9 date. The documentary is going to show the full production cycle of season 5, including the emotional finale table read, the Duffer brothers' decision-making process, and how they brought the final season to life. The timing of this announcement is what got people talking. It came right in the middle of peak Conformity Gate discussion. Loads of fans see it as Netflix's way of giving closure without giving episode 9. Like, here, have this documentary instead, stop asking about the secret episode. Others see it as misdirection, something to distract from what's really coming on January 7th. The Duffers released a statement about the documentary where they said they were inspired by the behind-the-scenes features for Lord of the Rings. They talked about how those making-of documentaries showed the real nuts and bolts of massive productions, and how with the decline of physical media, that kind of storytelling has disappeared. They wanted to bring it back. It's a lovely sentiment, genuinely, but it doesn't address the theory at all. Netflix themselves has been completely silent about Conformity Gate. They haven't tweeted about it, haven't made any official statements, haven't addressed the search results situation where episode 9 and fake ending bring up Stranger Things. That silence is being interpreted in two completely different ways. Either they're ignoring it because it's nonsense and not worth dignifying with a response, or they're staying quiet because addressing it would spoil the surprise. None of the cast members have really weighed in either. Usually, you'd have actors going on talk shows or posting on social media about the end of a series this big. But most of the Stranger Things cast has been fairly quiet, Millie Bobby Brown posted a thank you to fans. Finn Wolfhard shared some behind-the-scenes photos, but nobody's explicitly said, "There is no episode 9, this theory is wrong." That silence feels significant to believers, even though it probably just means the actors are respecting the Duffers' wishes to let the ending speak for itself. What we do know for certain is this: the Duffers have said the story is complete and done. They've refused to confirm Eleven's fate. They're releasing a documentary on January 12th. Netflix is announcing their 2026 slate on January 7th. And nobody involved with the show has directly addressed the conformity gate theory or explicitly denied that episode 9 exists. So they're not saying yes, but they're also not giving a hard no, which, depending on how you look at it, either means nothing or means everything. On January 5th, Netflix announced one last adventure, The Making of Stranger Things 5, a behind-the-scenes documentary dropping January 12th, and fans immediately had thoughts. The announcement came at this really specific moment in the Conformity Gate timeline. By January 5th, the theory had been spreading for 5 days straight. TikTok was flooded with analysis videos. Twitter threads were getting tens of thousands of likes. Reddit was having proper meltdowns in both directions. And right in the middle of all that chaos, Netflix announces a documentary about how they made the finale. The timing alone got people suspicious. The documentary itself sounds brilliant, to be fair. It's directed by Martina Radwan and covers the full production cycle of Season 5. We're talking about footage from the table reads, which apparently were incredibly emotional. Behind the scenes looks at how they filmed the massive battle sequences, interviews with the Duffers about their creative decisions, the cast saying goodbye to their characters after nearly a decade. It's the kind of comprehensive making of content that fans have been wanting for ages. According to the official synopsis, the doc follows the cast, creators, and crew as they bring the final season to life and say goodbye to the show that changed them forever. Netflix hasn't revealed the runtime yet, but given how long Season 5 was in production and how much material they could potentially cover, loads of people are expecting it to be feature length. Like an hour and a half at minimum, possibly longer. The Duffer Brothers released a statement about why they wanted to make this documentary. They talked about growing up in Durham, North Carolina, and how Hollywood felt impossibly far away when they were kids dreaming of becoming filmmakers. Then they watched the behind-the-scenes documentaries for Lord of the Rings, and everything changed. They saw how stressed Peter Jackson was, how chaotic the production was, how many problems had to be solved on the fly, and they thought, yep, that's the dream. They said that with the decline of physical media, that kind of on-the-ground, behind-the-scenes storytelling has largely disappeared, and they wanted to bring it back. It's genuinely a lovely idea. And for fans who just want more Stranger Things content, any content at all, the documentary should be amazing. You'll get to see moments like the cast reading the finale script for the first time, which the Duffers have said involved real tears from everyone. You'll see how they pulled off the technical achievements in the finale, how they coordinated the massive cast, how they made decisions about which storylines to prioritize. For people who are satisfied with the ending, this documentary will probably feel like the perfect epilogue. But for Conformity Gate believers, the timing is suspicious. The documentary comes out on January 12th, which is 5 days after the predicted episode 9 date. If episode 9 actually exists and drops on January 7th, then having the documentary come out afterwards makes sense. The doc could address both endings, show how they filmed the real conclusion, explain the whole elaborate plan. But if episode 9 doesn't exist, then the documentary is basically Netflix's way of saying, here, have this instead of the secret episode you wanted. Some fans see the announcement as Netflix trying to pacify the fandom. Like they realised how big Conformity Gate was getting and thought, we need to give them something. Others see it as the Duffers' way of explaining themselves, of defending their creative choices in the finale by showing the thought process behind them. If people understand how much work and emotion went into making the ending, maybe they'll be more accepting of it. There's also this other interpretation that's a bit more cynical. What if the documentary itself contains clues about episode 9? What if there are hidden messages in the footage, or the Duffers say something that confirms the theory? Believers are already planning to analyze every frame of the docs when it comes out, looking for validation. The trailer for the documentary dropped at the same time as the announcement, and it's properly emotional. You see the cast crying during the finale table raid. You see the duffers looking exhausted and stressed. You see massive practical sets being built, explosions being filmed, the whole scale of the production on display. It looks incredible, honestly. Whether this documentary is Netflix's way of giving closure or just making the wait until January 7th even more agonizing, we'll find out soon enough. Let's step back and actually think about this logically. Is there any world where Conformity Gate is real? I want to be clear here. I'm not trying to crush anyone's hopes or mock the theory. Loads of very smart, very dedicated fans have put genuine thought into this. But let's look at the practicalities of pulling something like this off. First, there's the production side of things. Episodes of television don't just appear out of nowhere. There are union regulations, contract requirements, copyright filings, all this administrative stuff that happens behind the scenes. When you make an episode of television, especially for a show as big as Stranger Things, there's a paper trail. People have to be paid, credits have to be filed, music rights have to be secured, visual effects studios have to submit invoices. It's not like the duffers can just secretly film an extra episode in their garage and surprise everyone. Fans who track these things have pointed out that copyright registrations sometimes show up in databases before episodes air. If episode 9 existed, you'd expect to see some trace of it somewhere. Now, believers argue that Netflix could delay filing or use creative accounting to hide it. And technically, that's possible. But it would require a conspiracy involving loads of people across multiple departments, all keeping the secret perfectly. That's a lot of trust to put in a lot of people. Then there's the financial angle. The theatrical release of the finale cost Netflix a significant amount of money. They got 600 cinemas involved across the US and Canada. They printed posters, coordinated with theaters, handled all the logistics. That theatrical run generated $20 to $25 million, which sounds impressive, but when you factor in the costs and the revenue split with theaters, Netflix's actual profit was probably modest. Would they really invest all that money and effort into promoting an ending they knew was fake? Would they risk the massive backlash when people realized they'd paid to see a misdirection? The Beyoncé comparison keeps coming up. She surprise dropped an entire album in 2013, and it changed the music industry. Since then, loads of artists have done surprise releases. But music and television are different beasts. An album is a self-contained product that an artist and their label can control completely. A television episode, especially for a show this big, involves hundreds of people, multiple corporate entities, international distribution deals. The logistics are exponentially more complex. Netflix has done surprise drops before, but they've been smaller scale. A stand-up special here, a documentary there. Nothing on the level of a secret episode of their biggest series. That doesn't mean it's impossible, just that there's no real precedent for it. There's also the question of why. What would Netflix gain from this elaborate deception? Attention, obviously. If they pulled it off, it would be the most talked about television event in years, possibly ever. But they already have attention. Stranger Things, 5 shattered viewership records. The finale crashed Netflix's servers twice. Everyone's talking about it. They don't need a stunt to generate buzz. And if the stunt backfired, if people felt manipulated or angry about being misled, that could seriously damage Netflix's relationship with their audience. The Duffer Brothers' track record also matters here. They're not known for elaborate metagames or unreliable narration. Their storytelling is pretty straightforward. What you see is generally what you get. They love Easter eggs and hidden details, sure, but those are usually fun bonuses, not essential to understanding the plot. Creating an entire fake finale and hiding the real one would be a massive departure from their established style. Past fan theories about Stranger Things are worth considering too. After Volume 2 of Season 4, loads of fans were convinced Netflix had edited the episodes and cut out major scenes. People compiled evidence, pointed to runtime discrepancies, claimed they could see where cuts had been made. The Duffers eventually had to address it, and they basically said no, nothing was cut, this is what we made. Most of those theories, it turned out, were coming from fans who were disappointed that their preferred ships didn't become canon. The Byler community, specifically, was driving a lot of that speculation because they wanted Will and Mike to get together romantically. And when that didn't happen, they convinced themselves it was because Netflix had interfered. Conformity Gate has some overlap with that community. Not entirely. Loads of people who don't care about Byler believe the theory too. But there's definitely a contingent of believers who are motivated by wanting a different ending for specific characters. When you really want something to be true, you can find evidence for it everywhere. That's just how human brains work. On the other hand, what if they're right? What if the Duffers and Netflix actually managed to pull this off? It would be the greatest plot twist in television history. It would fundamentally change how we think about finales and audience expectations. It would be studied in film schools for decades. The sheer audacity of it, the ambition, would be remarkable. And it would perfectly fit Stranger Things themes about hidden truths, alternate dimensions, and the power of perception. The evidence, when you lay it all out, is genuinely compelling in places. The visual clues could be continuity errors, or they could be intentional. The meta-details could be coincidences, or they could be breadcrumbs. The dialogue could be characters processing trauma, or it could be the show breaking the fourth wall. There's enough there that dismissing it entirely feels wrong. To be honest, the rational part of my brain says there's no episode 9. The logistics don't make sense, the precedent doesn't exist, and the Duffers have been clear that it's over. But the part that loves a good story, that part kind of wants everyone to be right. That part wants to wake up on January 7th and see Netflix drop the biggest surprise in streaming history. Look, the rational part of my brain says there's no episode 9, but the part that loves a good story, that part kind of wants everyone to be right. Regardless of whether episode 9 exists, Conformity Gate has become this massive cultural moment that says a lot about how we consume and interact with media these days. Fandom has always been participatory. People have been writing fan fiction, creating fan art, and theorizing about their favorite shows for decades. But social media has changed the scale and speed of it. Within hours of the finale airing, fans were already compiling evidence in Google Docs that ran to dozens of pages. TikTok videos were being made, edited, and posted before most people had even finished watching the episode. Twitter threads were going viral in real time. The theory didn't develop gradually over weeks, it exploded overnight. That speed is part of what makes Conformity Gate feel different from past fan theories. There wasn't time for a small group to develop the idea and then spread it. Instead, loads of people independently noticed things that felt off about the finale, started posting about it, and the theory coalesced almost organically. It's like collective pattern recognition happening in real time across multiple platforms. The Google Doc that believers have been updating is a proper piece of work. It's organized into sections with timestamps, screenshots, citations from interviews, links to relevant TikToks and tweets. People are treating this like an academic research project. There's a rigor to it that goes beyond typical fan speculation. Whether the theory is right or wrong, the effort and organization behind it is genuinely impressive. What's fascinating is how the theory has created this temporary community. People who've never interacted before are collaborating, building on each other's observations, correcting each other's mistakes. You've got folks with video editing skills, enhancing audio from the WSQK broadcasts. You've got people with graphic design experience creating comparison images. You've got those who are good at research, tracking down obscure interviews and production details. It's this whole ecosystem that's emerged around a single question. The debate within the fandom itself tells you something about how people engage with media now. You've got believers who are absolutely certain they've cracked the code. You've got skeptics who think everyone's lost their minds. And you've got loads of people in the middle who don't really believe it but are enjoying the ride anyway. All three groups are having completely different experiences of the same cultural moment. Some people have called it collective psychosis, which feels harsh, but I get where they're coming from. When you're deep in the theory, reading all the evidence, watching all the analysis videos, it's easy to get swept up in it. Pattern recognition is a powerful thing. Our brains are wired to find connections, to make sense of chaos. And when you're dealing with a show that's literally about hidden dimensions and alternate realities, the line between finding real clues and seeing patterns that aren't there gets proper blurry. But calling it psychosis misses the point, I think. What's actually happening is that Stranger Things trained its audience to watch this way. The show has always rewarded close attention. Easter eggs from season 1 pay off in season 4. Background details matter. Seemingly throwaway lines become important later. The Duffers built a show where everything could potentially mean something. So fans learn to look closely, to question everything, to assume nothing is coincidental. Conformity gate is just the logical endpoint of that training. There's also something to be said about how modern audiences relate to narratives. We're not passive consumers anymore. We pause, rewind, screenshot, enhance, analyze. We're essentially doing detective work on every piece of media we watch. Frame-by-frame analysis used to be something only film students did. Now it's standard fandom behavior, and platforms like TikTok and Twitter make it easy to share those findings with millions of people instantly. The conspiracy theory comparisons are uncomfortable, but kind of inevitable. The methods are similar. Collecting evidence, finding patterns, dismissing contradictory information as part of the cover-up, having a specific prediction date. It operates on the same psychological principles as actual conspiracy theories. But there's a crucial difference. This is about a television show. The stakes are imaginary. Nobody's getting hurt. It's conspiracy thinking as entertainment, which is honestly a pretty healthy outlet for that impulse. What makes Conformity Gate particularly interesting is how self-aware some believers are. Loads of them will say things like, "I know this is probably delusion, but I'm choosing to believe anyway." Or, "I don't actually think episode 9 exists, but the theory is more interesting than the finale was." There's this knowing participation, where people are engaging with the theory while simultaneously acknowledging it's probably not true. That's quite sophisticated, actually. The generational aspect matters too. Younger fans, the ones who grew up with YouTube theories and ARGs and immersive storytelling, they approach media differently than older generations for the hidden truths beneath mundane surfaces. And now, fans are convinced there's a hidden truth beneath the finale's mundane surface. Whether intentional or not, it's thematically appropriate. Setting aside all the conspiracy theories for a moment, there's actually quite a lot to unpack about what the finale is trying to say. The Duffer brothers have been pretty clear in interviews about what they wanted the ending to accomplish. According to them, this is fundamentally a story about saying goodbye to childhood. The entire final episode is structured around that theme. You start with this massive battle, this last adventure, and then you end with the kids closing the door on the basement where they spent their childhoods playing D&D. That door closing isn't subtle. It's the most literal visual metaphor possible. Eleven's absence in the epilogue is deliberate, whether she's dead or alive. Matt Duffer said in an interview that 11 represents the magic of childhood. She's the fantastical element that made their lives extraordinary. And as you grow up, you lose that magic. You can't take it with you into adulthood. So 11 being gone, one way or another, symbolizes that loss. The other kids are moving forward without her because they have to, because that's what growing up means. The D&D campaign that bookends the series is really the heart of what the show's always been about. It started with those kids in the basement playing a game, and it ends with them playing one last time before passing the torch to Holly and her friends. That generational shift, the older kids stepping aside so the younger ones can have their own adventures, that's about legacy and continuity, about how stories get passed down even as the original storytellers move on. Mike closing the basement door is meant to be this poignant moment where he's literally closing the door on his childhood. The Duffers have said that scene was the last thing they ever shot for the series, which makes it even more emotional. The actors weren't just playing characters saying goodbye to their childhoods. They were saying goodbye to the show that had defined their actual childhoods, wanted from the ending, and didn't get. Eleven has been the heart of this show for nearly 10 years. She's the character we met first, the one who suffered the most, the one who saved everyone over and over again. After everything she's been through, the abuse from her father, the experiments, the constant burden of being the world's saviour, loads of fans think she deserves better than dying alone in an explosion. They want her to have a happy ending, a real one, not a maybe she's alive in Mike's imagination one. The ambiguity is what kills people. If the Duffers had shown us definitively that Eleven survived and was living peacefully somewhere, that would be one kind of ending. If they'd shown us her death clearly and let the characters properly mourn, that would be another kind of ending. Both would have closure, but this middle ground, where we don't actually know, that's harder to accept. There's also this feeling that the ending was too safe. For a show that killed Bob and Billy and Eddie, for a show that wasn't afraid to be brutal and dark, having basically everyone survive felt odd. Steve made it through, despite being in constant danger. Max recovered completely. The core friend group all graduated and moved on to bright futures. After seasons of consequences and loss, suddenly everything worked out a bit too nicely. Will's arc felt incomplete to loads of people. His connection to the Upside Down, his feelings for Mike that the show hinted at but never fully addressed, his whole journey felt like it was building to something more. The finale gave him a future, but it didn't feel like a resolution, more like he just faded into the background. Some fans are still bitter about romantic pairings. The Byler community wanted Will and Mike together. When that didn't happen, and when Will's character didn't get what they felt was proper attention in the finale, that disappointment fed into the desire for a different ending. If this ending isn't real, then maybe the real one will give them what they wanted. There's also just the bargaining stage of grief. After 10 years with these characters, saying goodbye to episode 9, there's a wildcard scenario where Netflix does announce something Stranger Things related, but it's not episode 9. Maybe it's a release date for the animated series. Maybe it's casting news for the live-action spin-off. Maybe it's just the documentary getting a more prominent mention. Something that acknowledges the show, but isn't what believers are hoping for. And then there's the scenario that would break the internet. Episode 9 actually drops. The theory was right all along. The Duffers and Netflix pulled off the greatest television stunt in history. I'm not holding my breath for this one, but if it happens, absolute chaos. Whatever happens tomorrow, I'll probably be awake to see it. Because even if there's no episode 9, the journey of watching everyone collectively lose their minds over this theory has been properly entertaining. With everyone focused on whether the finale is fake, loads of actually brilliant details got overlooked. So let's talk about some of the things that made episode 8 special. The song that plays over the final credits is Heroes by David Bowie, the original 1977 version. That was apparently Joe Keery's suggestion. Peter Gabriel's cover of the same song was used at the end of Season 1, Episode 3, when they pulled what everyone thought was Will's body from the water. Having the Bowie original bookend the series is a really nice touch. Joyce and Hopper finally getting their dinner at Enzo's was something the Duffers had planned for quite some time. That date was promised way back in Season 4 and kept getting interrupted by, interdimensional horror. The reference to Montauk, where Joyce and Hopper plan to move, is a callback to the show's original title and setting before it became Stranger Things. Jonathan's anti-capitalist cannibal film is based on an actual movie the Duffer brothers made in college. There's so much care and thought that went into this finale, regardless of how you feel about the story. And that's worth recognising, even if you think Vecna's still pulling the strings. And that, my dear friends, is where we'll end tonight's video. So that's everything I can possibly cover about The Stranger Another Tuesday. I'll be here to talk about it. In a future video, I'm definitely going to cover the documentary when it drops on January 12th, break down any new information we get about the spin-offs, and probably revisit this whole theory once we know for certain whether it was brilliant, foresight, or collective delusion. There's definitely more to come. But for now, plenty to get talking about. If you like what I do here and want a way to support the channel, consider subscribing down below. Thanks for spending your evening with me, diving into this absolutely wild ride. Until next time, stay safe and sweet dreams.